Motherfucking mini episode. Mini episode. Motherfucking mini episode.
Yup. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another phenomenal episode of My Mama Told Me, the podcast where we dive deep into the pockets of black conspiracy theories, and we finally work to prove the theories that you, the listener, have at home. It's a mini episode, bitch. Did I not say that up top? Did I fuck around and just say it was a regular episode? Well, guess what, you dumb sluts? It ain't. It's a motherfucking mini episode. And like all mini episodes, we do it the same every single time. We talk to the people. We put our ear to the streets and we find out what's happening in your neck of the woods. And today's episode, this is an exciting one because it's coming from a neck of the woods I ain't never even been to. You know, this is coming from a neck of the woods I ain't never even been close to. I've been kind of close, but not anywhere in the actual country that this is coming from. And it's exciting. I'm excited that this person is a listener. I'm excited that they sent me this email. I'm going to read it to you guys now because it's coming. They came with a conspiracy theory that not only had I never heard of, but I'm not sure any of my listeners who do not hail from this particular region will have heard of. And that's some fun shit. So here we go. This person said, I want to say it right, Niaje Langston. Niaje. They tell me how to pronounce it in the actual email, but they said, Niaje Langston, my name is Wangari. I'm a freelance writer from Kenya. I listen to your podcast from Nairobi. I love it. I like how you tackle taboo subjects. No fear, no apology, no shame. I should have some shame, but I don't have any shame. Your research findings are interesting and quite informative. Overall, your podcast has me laughing every time. Well, that's very sweet of you, Wangari, but let's get to the meat and potatoes here. Get off my dick, Wangari. Let's get to the work. And Wangari said, I have a conspiracy theory. My mama told me if I wear or have anything red near me during a rainstorm, I will be struck down by lightning. In fact, I can recall when I was young, there was El Nino rains in Kenya. And for that whole season, I stayed away from anything red. I didn't want to call lightning upon myself or those who I was in contact with. This theory/superstition troubled me for a while. I thought people who live in houses with red walls and gates must be experts on how to deal with lightning because they are so frequently struck. Langston, have you heard of this one? What do you think? Great job with the podcast. I hope one day you will come do a comedy show in Kenya. I will be among the first people to buy the tickets. Well, Wangari, if there's comedy in Kenya, I'll come do the shit. And no, I haven't heard of this goofy superstition. It's a wild one, Wangari. This is not something I have to assume many Americans have heard of, and certainly not in my neck of the woods, but it's exciting. I like learning about new cultures and new shit that feels like nonsense, but probably is rooted in a type of logic that makes sense for where you're from, much in the way that a lot of the bullshit that we circulate in America makes sense to us. And I'm sure in other countries, people go, what is wrong with y'all? I have to assume you guys spend a lot of time saying, what is wrong with y'all in regards to American culture? Because boy, oh boy, are we not doing it correctly. You know? At its core, there's no way we're fucking nailing it in terms of representing any culture out in the world. But Wangari, I took some time to research your quote unquote conspiracy theory. And I think it's closer to probably a superstition, but it has conspiratorial elements to it. And so I did some research and let's talk about it. This Wangari was a hard one to even find basic information about, if I'm being honest, as it's so illogical that there aren't even a ton of articles debunking it. A lot of times there are at least articles being like, no, stupid, that's not real. There aren't even that many articles saying this isn't real. To be clear, part of the reason that isn't the case is because lightning is in no way attracted to any color. Lightning doesn't give a fuck about color. Lightning doesn't see color. Lightning's not a racist. And lightning also doesn't have jungle fever. It just strikes when it strikes, and there's not much you can do about it. Now, this does, however, feel like a superstition that was born from sort of an allegory, right? Like this is a superstition that might have been originally conceived because it was meant to teach us a lesson, to train us in terms of how we behave and see in the world. Like if I were to guess, and this is not rooted in any research, but just sort of like piecing together some of the clues in this superstition, if I were to guess, this superstition of not wearing red in order to avoid being struck by lightning feels a little bit like a lesson in humility, right? You don't go out in dangerous situations, dangerous settings, presenting as someone flamboyant or braggadocious. You want to move with modesty or your ass is going to get struck. So a person walking out into a rainstorm wearing red, it's a bold, a boisterous color, is probably going to get a negative response from the universe. That feels like the lesson that's on the back end of this. What's particularly interesting about this conspiracy theory, though, is that it has this weird existence across the world. I thought, when I originally read your email, Wangari, I thought this is for sure just going to be a Kenyan thing and nowhere else. This is some shit that the Kenyans fuck with and everybody else is going to be like, we ain't never heard of that before in our lives. But apparently, it's not just limited to Kenya. There are other countries in Africa that maintain this conspiracy theory. And for some reason, the other place where it seems to pop up the most is the Philippines. The Philippines and a number of countries in Africa are the ones who sort of maintain this singular superstition. And it got me wondering how a superstition about lightning seeing red makes it from Kenya to the Philippines or vice versa and nowhere in between. You know, how does that happen? Because I can't imagine there's a big Filipino crossover in Kenya, you know? I don't imagine y'all have like a dope foreign exchange program with the Philippines where it's just a bunch of Filipino people learning what do y'all do in Kenya? I know y'all got giraffes. That's about all I know. I'm very ignorant and I apologize for even speculating. I'm sure you have things much more important than just giraffes, but shit, I know there's giraffes there. Anyway, it got me thinking about the weird travels of other nonsense superstitions and how they make these sort of weird jumps. And what I ultimately discovered is that part of the way that these ideas travel is that at some point in history, what feels like silly ideas were not, in fact, as silly as we understand them to be. For example, I read an article, an Atlantic article, very reputable website, very reputable. But I read an Atlantic article about a common superstition that's maintained in Israel, Brazil, Egypt, and Italy that says that if a mom ignores her unusual cravings during pregnancy, right? If she gets pregnant, she starts having these cravings, and she ignores them, the child will be born with a birthmark in the shape of that food that she was craving. Again, it's complete nonsense. There's no real logic to this superstition. But while you can easily call whatever that is stupid or absurd, if you trace back historically, there was a point in time where people where more reputable people, scientists, politicians, philosophers were spreading these theories. Apparently, for example, Greek physician Galen, this is back when motherfuckers only had one name. The Greeks were good for that shit. They just went by one name. So there was a motherfucker named Galen who was a physician, apparently like a very famous doctor. But he believed that a pregnant woman need only to look at an image of someone and her child might resemble that individual, right? So basically, you could use this conspiracy theory to your advantage as a pregnant woman by gazing. This was back in the day. They believed you could gaze at statues of a person you admired, and that would encourage your child to come out attractive. Whereas alternatively, it could also have the opposite effect, that according to a person named Ambrose Payer, a surgical giant of the Renaissance, pregnant women who were exposed or even imagined alarming sights risked giving birth to malformed infants, right? So they're saying if you stared at a handsome ass statue of Socrates, then your baby would come out handsome like Socrates, thick beard, small penis, but good enough for back then. That's what they say. But then if you were to have bad imagery floating through your head, your baby would come out malformed. Now, through the years, we've debunked these conspiracy theories, right? This theory began to be disproved by this surgeon, William Hunter, in the mid 1700s, right? But even as these theories are being disproved, they continue to be spread by specific individuals. There were plenty of so-called medical professionals and experts who continued to spread these theories and even publish articles on the subjects much later, including, and this is how crazy the spread becomes, there are even articles that were uncovered from as late as 1992. That's like 2 weeks ago. 1992, a real scientist, although now he's been delegitimized, but a real scientist of the time talking about the potential legitimacy of quote unquote maternal impressions, which is exactly what we described, who else is here? It's just me alone in my room. But what I described earlier, that's right. There was a dude still being like, hey, if you stare at somebody handsome, you gonna have a handsome baby in 1992. That's crazy. 1992, we were almost cloning sheep, and there's just one idiot being like, maternal impressions, though. Let's talk about that shit. And that is, I think, the way that these conspiracy theories and superstitions continue to spread. It's not that they spread over like the masses, right? I don't know that the public itself is absorbing all of this information and spreading it as a whole. It's more that individuals hold on to these ideas. And it only takes one person who is quote unquote a legitimate source to make the information feel legitimate for a community. And sometimes the legitimate source doesn't have to be rooted in science. Sometimes it's just an elder or a person you respect. Sometimes it's just a person who represents a type of authority that you're not allowed to argue with. And one way or the other, if that authority exists, if that respect exists, it allows for what we might consider silly ideas to keep kicking around, i.e. wearing red out in thunderstorms. Moreover, and I think this might be a helpful, and I feel like we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but it never hurts to repeat. Moreover, the real root of so many of these arguments seem to be rooted in trying to make sense of something that is either completely random or completely scary. When they, back in old ancient Greece with their little penises and their togas and whatnot, they wore togas back then, right? Or is that the Romans? Again, not a learned man. And it's not specific to any culture. I'm not learning about none of y'all motherfuckers. I don't have time. I want to watch anime. I'm not about to. I'm not studying you. The point is, back in those times when they are saying if you stare at something scary or sad, you are potentially running the risk of giving birth to a malformed infant, what they are trying to do is add in logic to something that is sometimes genetic or random, right? Diseases in babies and deformities are things that just happen. Sometimes they're rooted in our blood, but they didn't have the skills to study blood and genetics back then. So it felt random. And instead of accepting the possibility that this was random, they go, well, there has to be a reason for this. You was looking at ugly statues. You was out here looking at weird-eyed goats. And that's why your baby came out the way it did. And that's not true, but it probably helped to comfort their nerves at the time, right? Lightning doesn't have a favorite color, and it doesn't care what kind of person you are, right? Lightning just strikes at random, and there's not much you can do about it. But by introducing a type of pseudo logic from both things you've observed and things you think you might be observing, these poor decisions, these things that feel out of control, make it possible, right? It no longer feels feels out of control. It feels slightly controllable. So you go, hey, my mom got struck by lightning and she was wearing red, so nobody should wear red because lightning likes to strike ladies in red. And the reality was your mom should have had her ass in the house because it was raining outside and lightning just happens at random and it's dangerous. But you feel a little better knowing that the red is what could save future family members from experiencing the same thing that your mother did. Okay, I hope, Wangari, that this is that this was helpful or at least made any sense. This was an interesting one, Wangari, and I do really hope to get to Kenya someday and tell some jokes. If y'all motherfuckers like to laugh and you understand very American references, then hell yeah, I'll come tell I'll tell jokes. But if I get there and y'all are like, hey man, we don't really know what you're talking about, you know what I mean? Like we ain't never even heard of half that stuff, then I'm just going to stay in America, Wangari. I'm not a learned man enough. Learned a man enough? I'm not even good at talking, Wangari. Why would you invite me to your country to talk stupid in front of your people? Why don't you respect your people, Wangari? Shame on you. You're the monster here, not me. Anyway, if you, like Wangari, want to send me weird conspiracy theories about lightning and who is trying to fuck up next, send me your conspiracies, your thoughts, your emails to mymommapod@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And if you live in Los Angeles, I would love for you to join me at my monthly show, Langston Kerman and Freaks. It's happening all at 7:30. 7 o'clock. 7:30. It's 7:30. I'm pretty sure it's 7:30 on December 15th. I'd love for you to be there. I think we'll have a great time. I'll have lots of funny people there. I'll do a little bit of a longer set and we'll have some laughs, and I'm sure somebody will serve up some cocoa or at least a chocolate martini. I bet the bartender can make a chocolate martini. If you want them to heat it up, I'll bring like a lighter and we could just heat up a chocolate martini and we'll call that cocoa. That's a Christmas to me. That sounds like a good ass Christmas. Anyway, okay, that's all I had to say. Bye, bitch.
Motherfucking mini episode. Mini episode. Motherfucking mini episode. Motherfucking mini episode. Mini episode. Motherfucking mini episode.